Hi there, I'm Kurtis, and I'm here today to talk to you about two new Doctor Strange epic collections. Volume 11, Nightmare on Bleecker Street, and a reprint of Volume 8, Triumph and Torment. Let's take a look inside these volumes. Okay, we're going to take an inside look at these two volumes. Let's start with the reprint, and if you're not interested in this, you can just skip ahead a little bit. This reprint is by Solisco, and it has the same great quality that we've seen in the terms of paper and reprinting that epics have had over the past year or so. The start of this series is by Peter B. Gillis with art from Richard Case, but it's quickly turned over to the hands of Roy Thomas and Butch Guice, who carried the title for a while through the 90s. Doctor Strange has got a really cool eye patch, as you can see. Plenty of action, going to different realms and fighting different creatures. This is standard Doctor Strange stuff. At the beginning of this book, they follow pretty closely to the template that Ditko had kind of outlined in the very early pages of Doctor Strange. Of course, we get some great guest stars. And one of the bonus features in the back of many of these issues is the Book of Vishanti, which kind of give us a little bit of history of the Sorcerers Supremes of the past. Pretty cool stuff. There's Agamotto right there, look at that. You'll see all of the regular baddies, Baron Mordo and Dormammu, and even Dracula. And there's a couple of fun issues here where, if I remember correctly, this was done because there's a time crunch and they couldn't get the penciler to finish on time, and so they had to write a prose story. So there's a crossover with Morbius in this volume, and then Doctor Strange gets sucked into the Acts of Vengeance storyline where he fights villains that he wouldn't normally fight in this regular series. Rounding out this volume is the excellent Triumph and Torment graphic novel starring Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, the two doctors, and it's drawn by Mike Mignola and written by Roger Stern. This one comes highly recommended, so if you want to buy the book just based on this, it'll be worth the price alone. And yes, this volume does reflect the price increase of the epics over the years. It's not priced the same as the other one that came out years ago. And on to the new one, Nightmare on Bleecker Street. This is the volume that just came out just recently. Here's a look at the spine for you. And on the back cover, Doctor Strange is powerless. One of the main storylines in here is that he loses his status as Sorcerer Supreme, loses all of his ability to do magic. And how is he going to get out of that one? This is the end of Roy Thomas's era of writing Doctor Strange, and he hands the reins over to a bunch of different writers, including Len Kaminsky and Jeff Isherwood and Gregory Wright, as they carry the title through the rest of the Infinity Saga. We're going to get a bunch of Infinity War tie-in issues in this one. And look at this. This is a Defenders story because Doctor Strange was part of the Defenders along with Hulk and Silver Surfer. So we get a little reunion with them. Of course, Dormammu has to make an appearance in every single Doctor Strange book. That's just kind of given, and he does so here for sure. There's a crossover with Morbius in this volume as well, and this one is even bigger than the last one as they face off against Dracula. And it's multiple issues. Doctor Strange actually becomes a vampire in this one for a little while, so you'll have to check that out. All of the annuals that came out in 1993 start a brand new character, and they came polybagged with a trading card. Killian was the character created for the Doctor Strange annual, and he actually plays a big role all the way through pretty much the rest of this book. It's a Jeff Isherwood creation, I believe, and I think that as he was writing the other issues, he wanted to tell a big story with this original character. Toward the end of this book, Doctor Strange is sucked into the Siege of Darkness storyline, and this is a multi-part story, I think 15 or 16 chapters, and they don't print all of the chapters in here, so we get a little text recap of what happens in the parts that are not in Doctor Strange issues. I assume that this will be collected in full in a different epic collection at some point, perhaps Ghost Rider, but it's not yet at this time. At the very end of this book, Doctor Strange gets a costume makeover, which will carry him through the next volume. So if you want to see how he gets that costume and why he gets that costume, you'll want to check out this book. Now, I know what you're saying. What about all the other Doctor Strange epic collections? Can you bring us up to speed on what we've collected already? Well, yes, I can. We're going to start with Doctor Strange Volume 1. This is the very beginning. It's called Master of the Mystic Arts, and it's the origin story by creators Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. Collects the entire Ditko run right here in this one volume. And just announced recently, Volume 2 is going to be coming out at the end of this year, 2023. It's called I Dormammu, so keep an eye out for that one. And that brings us to Volume 3. It's called A Separate Reality, and this collects the remaining issues of his first ongoing series until its cancellation. And then in the middle, you'll find a few random guest appearances, including the issues that serve as the beginning of the Defenders. And then, in the 70s, Doctor Strange launches a new ongoing series with Steve Englehart and Frank Brunner, and that's the very end of this collection right here that carries over into Volume 4, Alone Against Eternity. A lot of great stories in here in which Doctor Strange faces his normal rogues gallery like Dormammu and Nightmare, and in Volume 4, there's a crossover with Tomb of Dracula in which he faces the Lord of Vampires himself. One person I forgot to mention is the amazing Gene Colan, who was doing art through a lot of the last volume and through this volume as well. In fact, he was one of the original Doctor Strange artists after Steve Ditko took over way back in the 60s. There's some wonderful stuff in here as he teams up with writers like Roger Stern and Chris Claremont in this volume, Volume 5, The Reality War. And after this volume, we have a little bit of a gap. Volumes 6 and 7 have not been released yet, and they haven't been announced yet, so we don't really know when they're coming, but we do know that they are going to finish out the rest of Doctor Strange's 1970s series. And that brings us to Volume 8, which we talked about earlier, Triumph and Torment, the start of the Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme series in the 80s. And that leads us directly into Volume 9, the Vampiric Verses, in which Doctor Strange faces off against Brother Voodoo and Dormammu and Baron Mordo. And this is also the beginning of the Infinity Saga, in which Doctor Strange gets sucked into all of the craziness with Adam Warlock and Thanos. There are a lot of Infinity Gauntlet tie-ins in this volume. I mentioned the Infinity Gauntlet, and those tie-in issues continue in this volume here, Volume 10, The Infinity War. And not only that, but it stretches the entire year between that and carries us right into the Infinity War. So you have a lot of Infinity tie-ins in this one. But you also get a bunch of guest stars in here, including Wolverine, Spider-Man, Scarlet Witch, The Defenders, and even one of my favorite characters from the 90s, Sleepwalker. And then following that is Volume 11, which we've already talked about, Nightmare on Bleecker Street. There's a one-volume gap next. Volume 12 hasn't been released yet, and it hasn't been announced. We don't know when it's coming, but we do have this one here, Volume 13, and this volume closes off the Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme series. You can see that Doctor Strange goes through a pretty big transformation. He went through a big transformation already in Volume 11. Now he's going through it again here twice. This volume collects the short run by J.M. DeMatteis, and you'll probably want to check this out if you're a fan of his work. But after this, Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme was cancelled in favor of one-shots and miniseries instead of a longer ongoing series, and this book collects the first one of those. What is it that disturbs you, Stephen? And that's it as far as Doctor Strange Epic Collections are concerned. I hope you learned a lot from my video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.